Warlock came out in 1989. It's more of a lesser-known horror movie from the 80s.
I am he who makest whole the glorious goal of Satan's unborn soul!
It's a little bit of a silly movie that I watched over the weekend with a friend, and I was never intending to review it, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I liked it. So here's my review. It stars Julian Sands as the Warlock, and up to this point, I've only ever known him as that guy from Arachnophobia.
We'll take 2 back alive and preserve 2.
The movie opens up back in the late 1600s. The Warlock has just been captured and is awaiting execution.
You choose to admit your crimes before man and God?
But he escapes by teleporting himself to the present day, which in this case is the late 80s. And boy, can you tell. While in the future, the Warlock goes on a quest to hunt down the pages of a sacred book, and once he has all the pages, he's able to destroy the world.
Bring together all 3 parts, and you shall be him.
It shall be me.
Well, it turns out that a few of the pages are hidden inside of this house, which belongs to Cassandra with a K.
It's a little late for introductions, ain't it?
Your name.
Cassandra with a K.
Then hear me well, Cassandra with a K.
Well, lucky for Cassandra with a K, the Warlock doesn't kill her, but he does curse her to age 20 years every day.
Tout, thrown about your callow life in dismay, a decade twice over a day.
Now, I know what you're thinking. How is she ever going to get out of this? What can she possibly do against an ancient warlock with magical powers? Well, it turns out that Redfern, the 17th century witch hunter who tracked down the Warlock in the first place, followed him through the wormhole and is also in present-day 1989. He teams up with Cassandra with a K, and the two of them work together to track down the Warlock.
Like almost 300 years ago?
As queer it seems to you, 'tis even more so to me.
And for lack of a better word here, their adventure is more of a romp. Even though the consequences are dire, you just can't help but have fun watching them. She's growing older every day and has to hobble everywhere she goes. And since he's from the past, not only does he not know how anything works...
Hey, other door, okay? Other door.
But everything he does is just so out of date and strange.
What are you doing?
Sorting the leather.
No kidding.
They make for a hilarious duo. But even with all of this, the movie still manages to be pretty tense. Julian Sands took his role as the Warlock very seriously, and it made for such a threatening character. And the same can be said for Richard Grant, the guy who played Redfern.
Now, Brute, one last time will we play the game out?
Both of these guys really committed to their roles, which is impressive considering how odd the premise is and how low budget this movie is. This really could have been a lot more slapstick, but thanks to their performances, the whole time travel premise, and their overall dynamic, it worked for me, and it made the movie just that much more believable.
Who appointed you executioner, Redfern?
It was you yourself. When one life too many, you did steal.
I'm also really impressed with the lore they built into this movie. Just like the actors, the writers could have just given their minimum here and relied mostly on the gore and violence to carry the movie. But they didn't. There's a lot of nuances in the movie that just makes the lore so rich. Like keeping pennies in your mouth to ward off evil magic. Or hammering nails into a witch's footprint. And probably the most disturbing bit of lore had to do with the idea that the main ingredient for a potion was the fat of an unbaptized child.
Of all ingredients used by a witch, the most coveted is human fat. And if that fat is cut from an unbaptized male child, there is but one purpose. One thing it will beget.
I'm listening.
Flying potion.
Yeah, the Warlock actually kills a boy and drinks his fat, which gives him the ability to fly. I realized about halfway through this movie just how rare of a genre this is. This is a horror fantasy, not just a horror movie with ghosts or vampires or werewolves or, God forbid, vampires and werewolves. No, this is a legit horror fantasy. This movie actually has a well fleshed out magical system. It has quests.
Do what I demand. Bring together all 3 parts.
And even a decent sense of world building. The only other like horror fantasy movie I can think of is Leprechaun. And even though the Leprechaun franchise is a lot more popular than this one, I'd much rather watch this any day. I also really like the special effects. Now, don't get me wrong, the effects have not aged well. The magic effects look so cartoony, but I don't care. I think it adds to the charm of the movie, and even though they look fake, I still think they look good. My biggest complaint about the movie is how watered down it is. This should have been much more gruesome. Even though this is a rated R movie, it never feels that way. A lot of the gore is done off screen, and what little is done on screen isn't very convincing. Like there's a scene where the Warlock cuts out the eyes of a fortune teller to help find the pages that he's looking for. But this is all done off screen. He just brings the eyes into frame. This is such a PG-13 way of doing that. And to be honest, this was a real letdown. It didn't feel like I was watching something worthy of an R rating. And the same can be said for when he killed that little boy. We never actually see the Warlock do anything to the kid. He just talks to him for a while, and then we get the summary in a later scene.
They do that sometimes. Kyle will come down and drag off a small child. Boy is fairly well chewed up from what's being said, skin taken clean off.
Now, I'm not saying that I want to see kids killed in movies, but at the same time, I'd like to see something that actually makes the Warlock seem like he's the bad guy. Because the way it was done, it never really made it seem like the boy was in danger. Altogether, this is a great movie, and it's definitely worth a watch. I can understand if you missed it, because this is kind of an obscure one, but it's streaming on Amazon right now. So if you have Amazon Prime, give it a watch. Thanks for watching, everyone. My name's Kenny, and until next time, let's not just watch movies, let's talk about them too.